We appreciate you taking the time out of your evening for what we feel and hopefully you see as an important topic that is pretty wide-ranging and it might take a little to digest. So we'll hopefully have some follow-up information and details as time goes on. So tonight is about finding your player's path in American soccer. My name is Ryan Cruz. I'm the boys' director of coaching for Sporting Omaha. And we will have a special guest tonight from Sporting Kansas City Development Academy, Coach Declan Jogi. Before we have him come up and talk, just a little bit about the premise of this meeting, right? We're going to talk a little bit about how there's been a paradigm shift in U.S. soccer. We're going to talk about what does it mean for a pathway, and a lot of it will stem around the individual nature of that concept. Okay, and most importantly, how does, or I should say, the various pathways and how does this changing landscape affect your children, your players? That's really the ultimate question, right? So we're going to talk about on a local level and of course on a broader level across the country what that means. So we'll save the end for some questions and answers. So for now, I will turn it over to Coach Declan Jogi.
Thank you, Ryan. So there were two Brazilians sitting on the beach, just reminiscing about the past. And one says to the other, he says, "Hey, you think there's football in heaven?" Like, wow, that's a good question. Let's make a deal. Whoever dies first, you go check it out. Make sure you come tell the other one. Got it? Got it. 2 years later, one of them dies, passes on. Middle of the night, he comes back as a ghost, wakes up his brother. "Hey, wake up, wake up. Hey, it's you. What do you think? What's going on in heaven?" He says, "I got good news and I have bad news." He says, "The good news is there's football in heaven. The bad news is you're starting in the next game." So football is life. To a Brazilian, it's life. And to those who have been a part of it since you were young, and for some of your kids, it's life, right? It's everything. They eat, they sleep, they drink it, they breathe it. It's their world. So we're fortunate in the U.S. that we have the resources to help them on this pathway, to help them on this journey. So ultimately, it's a journey that they undertake, okay? And so it's important to understand what the journey may look like. So there's three big things we're going to talk about is how the landscape is changing, how it has changed, and how that affects who you are and the pathway of your individual player, both men and female, okay? Then what is the pathway, so that will tie it to what's going on here at Sporting Omaha, and then how that relates to what we're doing at Sporting Kansas City. And then most important is related to that now is how do you fit into it? How does your individual player, your child, your son or your daughter fit into this pathway, okay? So the biggest shift is this. In the past, at youth soccer level, it was all about state cups, regionals, and nationals, winning games. So coaches had to train players to go and win games. That is changing. That has changed since the U.S. instituted the Developmental Academy in 2007/2008 with the mandate that it has to be focused on player development. So away went the need to win games, and the focus began to focus on individual development to produce world-class players. Okay, so it's going to change how we define success at a youth level in football. Everybody's new. I know it's been about maybe 8-9 years the developmental academies have been in place, but it's still an evolving program. It's an evolving evolution because there's two layers to it. There's non-MLSDAs and there's MLSDAs. And those are two different things, and they affect players differently, but the ultimate goal is the same, is to develop individual players and put them on a pathway to maximize whatever their potential is, wherever their journey might take them. So our goal with Sporting is to help the affiliates navigate those pathways. And so it's important that we're supporting and we're helping provide resources in different ways to help support the men on the ground and women on the ground that are actually hands-on in the front line with the kids, all right? So this shift, it's important to understand. what individual player development might look like, right? It's focused on the individual. So it's about what is the journey for the individual player versus what is the journey for that team. Very important to understand that. What is the journey for each player versus what is the journey for that team? Can the team's journey affect the journey of each individual player? Yes. But it's more important to make sure that each individual player's journey is the priority versus the team's. We'll talk about that just a little bit later. So just very recently, just even I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, this came out in the press. This is an announcement by US Soccer. They are doing away with the U17 men's residency program simply because it was set up with the intention to, because at the time, US Soccer didn't have, at club level, didn't have the vessels to develop individual players and put them on a pathway. So they instituted the U17 residency program. Well, the DA's goal was to be able to get to a place where across the states, we were able to do that. And they feel comfortable now that the USDA is in a place where they are doing that, both at an MLS level and a non-MLS level, to provide players the world-class training and support necessary to produce world-class players. And so from next year, there'll be no U17 residency program. That is a big step. It's a huge step in the US soccer landscape. So just to give an example, the U14 boys pool 2017, just lately in the last camp in February, had 35 players. So I mentioned the difference between an MLS academy and a non-MLS academy. Both have a part to play. But what's tending to happen is players from US development academies, where there were 33 out of the 35 players. Of those 33, 18 came out of MLS academies. But of those 18, there are only 20 MLS academies versus 72 total academies. So less than 1/3 of the DAs are from the MLS. But at least half or over half of the players in the U14 national team came out of the MLS DAs. Why is that? That's simply because the resources that the MLS academies are putting in is giving players a better opportunity and putting them in a better environment to be able to get on this journey and become world-class players. So what does that look like for us at a regional level? Well, as you can see, there's a wide range of empty spots. First of all, right? White spots. You see a lot of white in that diagram. Those are open territories. That is where any MLS club can go and find a play in any of those territories. So Sporting, ours is that big blue in the center. It's a big geographical area, but it doesn't go all the way down to the blue. But as you can see in Mid-America, we've got a wide geographical reference, but we have a small population to pick from. So that's one of our challenges, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Ryan will talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But as you can see from the map, we have challenges in the US that people in Europe don't have. Geographical challenges, especially in Mid-America. Big holes in Mid-America for us. And population density is one of the biggest ones. So regarding the challenges, some of these challenges are unique to Sporting Omaha, but some of them are very general, and all the affiliates and a lot of clubs around the country that are not MLS academies face. I'm going to step over and give over to Ryan for a second. He's going to talk a little bit about the challenges you face with Sporting Omaha.
So as Declan mentioned, geography is something that just generally works against us here. You can take into account population, climate, all that good stuff, and it does resonate to really all players based on what opportunities are at hand, and specifically on the boys' side of the equation. What has really happened is there's been somewhat of a glass ceiling as our players of elite level age to 16, 17, 18 years old. And so by our litmus test, by our standards around here, usually U18 players, high school players was considered kind of it. That was like the last option locally that older players could achieve. And this applies on the girls' side to an extent as well. But because of that, when players then who had the ability and desire to move on, those before the advent of the development academies, and especially our relationship with Sporting Kansas City, there was no way to bridge that gap for players who were going on maybe to participate in college or even those that wanted to go on. So the result was, unfortunately, a lot of players would just stop playing. And you even see that in this day and age, even in the last few years, that dynamic has not fully corrected itself. So understanding this pathway, and we'll have a more of a graphic view here for you in a minute, is when players first get introduced to the sport at age 3, 4, 5, all the way to whatever their ambition and their talents allow them to achieve, and everything in between becomes reality, whether that be for that 0.001% playing professional, whether that be more access to college programs and placement, or maybe that's just playing on a high school team and enjoying the heck out of it. But now that pathway can be continual. And so it's important that you understand in the context of our club and what we're trying to do, because we don't have a development academy here, okay? Being affiliated with one is very, very important. And we'll get to in a little bit so you understand how that trickle-down effect influences all of our players. So I'll let Declan talk a little bit more on the macro scale of the challenges that Eva Sporting KC faces.
So Ryan mentioned geographical challenges, right? So we have maybe a 1.5 to 2 million population in Kansas. Anyone want to guess what New York City is? They have a 50-mile radius. New York Red Bulls. They have a 50-mile radius from which is their area. Ours extends almost 100 to 200 miles out. This is 50-mile radius, but they have 3 times the amount of players to pick from. So we face the same challenges as a DA in identifying or having at least a population from which we can pick from. That's why the affiliate program is an important program to us. And nobody else in the US is at the MLS level is reaching out and investing as much into affiliates as we are at Sporting. So it's very important. So Ryan talked about older players aging out. The same thing happens in Kansas. The exact same thing happens in Kansas. The good thing with us is within Kansas alone, we've got 2 affiliates, Sporting Lee Summit and we're Sporting Blue Valley. So that's changing. So even players that come into the academy, not all of them end up as pros. Some of them are going to be, their step is going to be going into college. And so we have a support system between us, between Blue Valley and Lee Summit, where players can be in the right fit. So there's players that will start in the academy and at their junior or sophomore, junior or senior year are going into the Blue Valley system or Lee Summit system so they can get exposure now at different levels. They may be at a different level, right? Being the DA gives you the highest level exposure. You're looking at the top 25 schools in the country are looking at those players. If you're not one of those players, then you probably need to look at the next level down. And so that's the beauty of the affiliates. There's a place for everybody and a spot for everybody on the pathway. And like Ryan said, it's just not at the college or pro level. It goes down to the rec level, which is where most affiliate clubs, that's the starting point. That's the grassroots. They all begin there. All players begin at the grassroots level and should begin at the recreation level and falling in love with the game and then growing from there. If they want to continue to be recreational, that is fine. They can continue. As this diagram shows, they can start at 4 and under and play rec till 19 and under. That is fantastic that Sporting Omaha has that program, right? Then they can get into academy, 9 and under and 10s and under, and start preparing them for select, which is 11 and under to all the way to 19 and under. And then from there, we're looking at now players that have the ability and qualities or aspirations to step into the next level. That's where we come in. The DA comes in. And we have, the beauty with the affiliates is we have an open door policy with our affiliates. Any point in time, Ryan can call us and say, hey, I got a player. Can he come in and train? The answer is yes. On his schedule, he can come in and train for a week at any point in time. He can come in and train. We can look at him in environment and we can evaluate him. If we don't feel he's ready, guess what? The door stays open. We'll tell him a few things to work on. We'll work in conjunction with his coaches or his directors. He goes back, he works, he can come back a month later and train again. We have an open door policy with our affiliates for players to come in and train to see if the closer they get to that level, if they have those aspirations. Okay? I think that's important. But it's also important to understand that the journey has got many levels. Ryan just said it. Recreational, college, pro, there's so many different levels that can play. The key is that they enjoy and have a passion for the game. Very important. So at Sporting, our player pathway looks a little bit more, I apologize that it's so small, when our graphics guy did it, I didn't think he realized it was going to be this small on the PowerPoint. But essentially, it addresses the same model that you have at Sport in Omaha. What does it look like from the youngest player right through to the adult? Well, so the U3 and U7 is that early childhood phase. This is our Sporting Stripes program, if you've heard of it. It's just a 3 to 5 year old program. The kids come in and they kick around and play fun games. It's recreational, in essence. That's what it is. It's a recreational program that we kind of run in Kansas City. And then we go from U8 to U12. And for us, it's mostly camps. It's our youth programs. And right now, we hired a new guy to take over our camps program to really get it more in line with the pathway. So he could stay more connected to what we're doing in the academy. So Ryan talked about the trickle-down effect. So in essence, we really the pathway starts from the top for adult, for pro, and then it works back. So we start with the first team, and then we start working back to say, how do we connect every program to the first team? From curriculum to core values to methodology, all those things are important. How do we connect it right back from the first team right down to the Sporting Stripes program? Okay? And that goes together with the affiliate program, because you can see there, our network expands from the Sporting Club network out to the affiliates and then the DA proper. That little one on the left of the DA is actually the Centers of Excellence. I don't know if you can read it. It's right here. It's the Centers of Excellence. That is a club neutral program. There's actually a couple of players from Omaha that are participating in that program. That is a club neutral program that we use for U9s through U11s. Primarily, it was designed to get a touch point for kids within the Kansas City area, because we had no touch point for those age groups. Our first touch point is U12. And the other MLS clubs around the country already have 9s and 11s proper in the academy, training full-time with the academy. We, on the other end, we're not so sure that's the way to go about it for those age groups. We think it's important that they train locally in their club, stay a little more local, and then do supplemental training at Centers of Excellence. So that's our Centers of Excellence programs for U9 to U11. And then not all those players will filter into the DA. It's just a large pool again that we have a touch point with, and we see how they go and they develop. Then from the DA, so as you can see the arrows over there, to the right, the first right column there is collegiate soccer, then USL, MLS, and international teams. So as you can see by the arrows from the Sporting Club Network, Academy affiliates, you can still jump into the college soccer. You don't have to be in the DA to become a college level player. Then once you're in the DA, you can also jump to the college program, or you can end up being the USL program, or you can be in national teams or a full-time MLS homegrown player. Different pathways, players get there differently. Okay, so to paint the picture of what that really looks like on the ground, this is our current enrollment in the academy. So this last year we've got, those are all our teams, 12 through 18s. So the light blue or sporting blue is the numbers, the percentage out of our affiliate programs. 54% of all our players in the academy currently came out of the affiliate programs. That's a large percentage. We're the only club that has that level of participation out of the affiliates in the DA proper participating. So 34% are from within the MLS homegrown territory. So that could be within Kansas or in our greater field, but may not be in one of the affiliates. And then 13% from other, and usually that's like kids from the non-territorial areas. So the areas that you saw that were white. So those are the players coming out of that area. And that traditionally tends to happen once they get more into the high school age groups, tell them that they're relocating and moving down, okay? So just an example of two different pathways. Everybody knows Dom Dwyer, okay? Dom Dwyer is English. Not anymore. He's actually an American citizen. This happened a couple of weeks ago. But he grew up in Norwich, and he played in Norwich City, and then he moved to US and played in a community college. And then he transferred to Southern Florida, and then went in the 2012 MLS draft, right? A unique pathway. Felipe, quite interesting enough, Felipe Hernandez, at 15 he moved. We offered him a spot in the academy. He was from Sporting Nashville. And at 15 he decided that he was going to make the commitment. He always had the ability and the talent, but at 15 is when he started to make the choice, the commitment to the game, and we felt it was time to bring him in. So he came in at 15, and he played for 2.5 years, and right now he's committed to the University of Louisville, but he's on a pro contract. He's on a USL pro contract. Signed him this season, 2017. He's been to 3 national camps at 2019. And just right now, this weekend, he's actually been invited into the U20 national camp, which will be in London for the next 2 weeks in April, 2 weeks of April. So that's an interesting story for Felipe. So players have different pathways. That's just an example of a pathway, okay? So players, what does that mean for you? It really has to be your decision. It has to be the player's decision. It's so important. And it's important that we guide them along their pathway. There's no, as the word says, there's no cookie cutter. There's no template for a player along the pathway, all right? But it's important that you be realistic. Your dreams will start big when you're younger. Players' dreams will start big. And then hopefully over time, as they develop more self-awareness, they will start to become more realistic with their dreams. For example, I coached the U13s in the academy. And at the beginning of the year, we asked them to fill out a long-term goal sheet. And to a fault, every single one of them, the first two there's 5 spaces. The first 2 are usually Barcelona, Man United, Real Madrid, always, without fail. And we do it every year. As they get to U14, it starts to change. Usually Sporting is somewhere down the line, about 3rd or 4th in that list, in their national team. When we get to U14, U15, the Barcelona starts to disappear, Sporting moves up the list, college starts to enter in. You get to U16, U17, and the reality starts setting in. And then those that can see the writing on the wall, you know what? I think I need to focus on the college pathway. Forget the pro. You know what? I think maybe college is not even for me. I just want to I want to play in college if I can, but I really want to go to a certain school. My grades are really good. I really want to go to a certain school. So if I get to play, I get to play. Maybe I'll play club soccer. And those are conversations we have along the way, and those are things we try to nurture within the academy. That's the process. When they come in at U12, we try to help them on that process of the journey. But at the end of the day, it's always driven by the player. It's important that the player makes the decisions along the way. So when the player comes to me and says, I want to play for Barcelona, I say, fantastic. Now, the next point is, what do you need to do to achieve that goal? Let's go to work. And as we work through it, self-awareness steps in, and along the way, with guidance, they start to realize, okay, some goals are realistic, some goals are not so realistic, and they start to adapt them. So I think it's important, players, that you understand that it's your goals, it's your dreams, but along the way, be self-aware, understand who you are and what the level is out there and what it takes to get there. What is the role of the parents, though? Vice versa, it's important to manage those expectations. Not to crush those expectations, but to manage them. It's important for players to dream. It's very important. It's important for you to encourage those dreams. Even if they're not realistic in the early onset. Allow the environment, allow the process to help you ask the right questions of them at the right time that produces that self-awareness that says, okay, maybe I'm not a player that's going to end up in Barcelona in the next 3 to 4 years. Maybe I need to think about something else. Maybe college is going to be my pathway. Can you end up as a pro after going to college? Yes, as our diagram earlier stated. Maybe every player has a different pathway. It's also important to maintain perspective, right? Kids are kids. It's important that they be kids. It's a hard thing for us in the academy to maintain that perspective because we get them in at U12 and they're on a 3 to 4 day a week schedule, and it's a 10-month schedule at that. So it's important even for on our end that we maintain the perspective that they are kids. They are 11, they're 12, they're 13. So what we do sometimes is we have fun days. We'll play kickball. We'll do something completely different and not soccer related, just so they can be kids. So maintaining that perspective of who they are, and at the end of the day, they're just kids, and they need to be able to be treated like that too. Okay, the focus should be on enjoyment and desire to improve. That comes back to teaching self-awareness. That comes back to learning how to goal set. That comes back to focusing on what's important. Hopefully they're only playing, first of all, because they love the game, first and foremost. One of the other things we do when they first come in, especially the U13 age group, U12, it's like a honeymoon. It's their first experience in the academy. They're all excited. It's a honeymoon. U13, sophomore here, we start to ask them real questions of them. So one of the things we ask them to do is write down and describe why they play soccer. And it's very interesting. You learn a lot about a kid when you ask him to think about something like that. And 100% of the time, the answer is something to do with how they enjoy the game. Either enjoy the game or they enjoy playing with friends. It's usually one of those two things is the primary thing. And then because they realize that they have some talent and they're pretty good, or people said they're pretty good, then they start thinking about aspirations, what they want to do with the game. But 100% of the time, Every player plays because they have fun and enjoy playing with their friends. Okay? So coaches, what's your role in all of this? Well, it's important to be honest. Very important to be honest, but gentle. But it's also important to give feedback, but gentle feedback, and to educate the player and the parents. Very important job. Parents, it's important you also trust the coaches, that you trust the process, because it's a journey. So at Sporting, the way we're set up, I coach U13, but that's what I coach. So at U14, they move on. I get them for 1 year and they move on because we trust the process. We have a process in place, and we specialize at each age group, and then we move them on. So trust the process. Trust the process that's your directors here at Sporting Omaha have developed, because they also have our support. We're working with them. We know what they're doing over here, and we support what they're doing, and we think they're doing a great job.
Real quick, before we move too much farther on, I wanted to give you a little couple examples of maybe the essence of what we're talking about. Before I do that, I want to just explain for some of you who are not completely aware of the concept of the Development Academy. These are players who are in a program, like Declan mentioned, a 10-month program, and there's no high school participation. There's no ODP participation. There's very rarely do any of them, except for maybe some at the younger ages, ever participate in state cup. And that's not for everybody, right? That's not for everybody, but part of our education, part of what we're trying to create in terms of the perspective is that there's more soccer out there. There's a lot more soccer out there. And as far as the examples I want to give that show you kind of, how does this affect me? Because sooner or later, if individual opportunities come up for players, that may conflict with, and if we're doing our job right, hopefully supersede team obligations, okay? I'll give you a couple examples. One, last fall, we had one of our 98s, Matthew Smith, who was participating regularly in training with the Sporting KC Academy, all during the fall, which took him out of eligibility for tournaments that our 98 team was participating in, including State Cup. So, if we're setting the groundwork for these situations, it's not a shock to the system that we get to what some may consider, an important game or a big game or a game that, a tournament that results in qualification somewhere. We bring in our second goalkeeper, okay? The players are groomed to understand we don't panic. It's not the end of the world. It's next man up. So even though it may seem like we're talking about just that high level of players, that trickle-down effect will come into play. On a side note, second team goalkeeper Blake Ellis, who's a fine goalkeeper in his own right, stepped in, pitched a couple shutouts in the tournament, and had an opportunity that he normally would not have had. Okay? That's how it affects your kids. Another one was just recently here in the last month. Sporting had a promotion for the affiliates where they were going to take 10 to 12 players off of recommendation for an opportunity to play in the GA Cup, which is an international tournament down in Texas later this month. So there was a couple weekends of tryouts, okay, for our 05s and 06s. We had 5 players go down, 4 of whom were off of our 06 team, coached by Mike Dean. James had a little bit to do with that as well. Where one weekend, there was a conflict with 3 out-of-town league games, okay? Those players openly and welcomed by us, supported promoted through coach, club, and families, went to participate in the tryouts for the GA Cup, because it was a unique opportunity that normally would not have been provided by us locally, that we felt was best for them. 2 of those players, Cole Essner and Sam Shent, ended up making the event, and they'll be participating later this month. But in lieu of that, 4 players from our second team at 06s stepped in and participated with our elite team in that weekend of 3 games, highly competitive games, that they would not have had the opportunity for had there not been these levels of soccer that we're talking about. And I guess of all the things we're getting across to you all is that's the effect. That's the essence of all of this, is that it's next man up, next opportunity, and creating opportunities where they normally would not have been there. Good?
And that's the trickle-down effect, because I said, look, from the first team down, the pathway starts from the first team down. So at the first team level, I'll give you an example. Last month, we had our first DA games. First teams in season, USL teams in season. We had 9 players from the U18 Academy team with the USL team. So we went down to games in Texas, and we took 5 U16s into the U18s. And vice versa, we took 6 U14s into the U16 team. It's a trickle-down effect. It's a game that mattered. It's a game for points, but it doesn't matter because next player up has got to step up and go. And the beauty of this is one of our core values at the club. The very first core value we have is team first. We aspire to the idea that there's only one team at Sporting Kansas City, and it's the first team. Yes, there's 6 or 5 teams in the DA, there's 15 affiliates, but there's really only one team. And every player and every team is pointing to that team. So when that trickle-down effect happens, it's focused on each player's development on that pathway. And what does it teach the players? It's incredible what players learn when it's time to step up. It's incredible what they learn when they feel like their best player is gone and what they have to do, how they respond. And as a parent, I'm a parent too. The lessons I want my kid to learn are that. I want my kid to learn how to deal with adversity. I want my kid to learn that they're part of something bigger than themselves. And a team teaches that, but a club and an organization teaches that at a greater level. So we point everything towards the first team. Every work we do is to help the first team. But along the way, it's important that we're patient. There's 2 things, and this is from Peter Vermees, his own words. There's 2 things you have to be patient with in life. There's many things. Kids are one of them. But 2 things are your career and relationships. And what we're trying to do in Sporting with the affiliates and within our teams from the first team down is build relationships. And you have to be patient with those. There are going to be rocky roads along the way. There's going to be disagreements along the way. But you have to be patient. You have to be patient in your career. It comes back to trust in the process. The process is designed to make players better, to make them better players and make them better people. And in building those relationships, hopefully you're achieving both. You're creating a pathway that suits them, in which they become men and women of character. So just a reference point to these next man up reference point. Are there any questions at this point? I got a quick slide over here that addresses what it looks like on the female side of the game. For primarily what we're talking about happens mostly on the boys' side, but we are excited about the changes happening on the female side of the pathway. So any questions so far on what I've presented and what we've talked about so far? You could ask a little bit after the slide too, no problem. Okay, on the girls' side, this is something we feel even as a club like it's a missing piece. Again, you need to be patient in your career and patient in your relations. This is a piece that we felt we were missing in the club along the pathway. But for the last 3 years, I don't know how many of you may know this, Sporting Club actually tried to purchase FC KC. We tried to do that. But that didn't work out. So the next step was, okay, what's the next step? And then when the DA came about, we said, no, this is the next step. We've got to make sure that we get a DA on the women's side, on the girls' side. And we're thankfully, Sporting Blue Valley was able to secure that. And we've got a DA on the girls' side, which now creates an opportunity for us to improve the pathway on the female side. Okay, so we've got all these programs that are open to the girls, and we're going to do more on the college identification and the college recruitment side. Liam and the guys are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. We've got our very first college showcase, November 17, in the fall, 2017, females and males, to promote our players on their college pathway, which we're very excited about. But on the women's side, the landscape is a little more different, right? Because one, there's not as many professional teams, and the pay is not as great. But the bonus on the women's side is there are actually more scholarships available for the college game. Way more. I don't know what the number is, but it's significantly more support on the women's side for scholarships and financial support than there is on the men's side. So we're excited about these initiatives to help develop and to support our affiliates primarily on the female side of the pathway. Any questions? Any thoughts, additional thoughts, Shane? Got any additional thoughts, Shane?
No, other than, when Declan opens up for questions, we're talking about, at his level with Sporting KC, on our club level, we just want to make sure that this is, making some sense. And of course, anything that you have, which, is directly, how does this affect, my son or daughter at this age or this level? Ultimately what we're trying to accomplish here is the idea that everything in between can be taken care of through us, through Sporting. And I think it's just important that you understand it's not about one group of players anymore, okay? At this age, a U14 team or our top U15 team, it's about all of the players in this club and creating opportunity. But again, if it's all clear as mud to you, then if you have any questions after the fact, you can always, yeah, Joel.
Ryan Fickman. As a parent of a young son, is there an opportunity to spectate a DA and see what it looks like as a spectator prior to the kid even coming to age?
Oh yes, absolutely. So we have a policy. This is from the top down. Our affiliates, anybody associated with our affiliates, can come and watch the first team train. Now there's certain closed practice days, so you got to make sure there's a process. You'll check in with Ryan. We'll check in with us. Hey, this is the day you can come and watch. So the same goes for the academy. Anyone in our affiliates can come and watch a training session at any point in time, especially in the academy. All sessions are open to our affiliates. Yeah.
Just got to let us know first.
Mm-hmm.
You guys talked a lot about developing players through training and working and playing and competing. Is there also a nutritional or health aspect of the program as far as teaching kids to take care of their bodies, eat healthy? I haven't heard a lot about that.
In the DA, we do. Quite funny you asked that question because, again, it's a trickle-down effect. This came from the boss. We hired a nutritionist. She came in and cleared out all the bagels out of the kitchen, much to our demise of the coaching staff. But so yes, we brought in a nutritionist to improve the nutrition aspect. So that's one area Peter felt like we weren't doing a good enough job. So we hired somebody to come in and they've redesigned everything in the kitchen and our meal plans right through the academy. So she spent time with the academy players and parents talking about nutrition and helping them along the pathway.
And with Sporting OC being an affiliate with you guys, will there be best practices that will be passed down to them or available?
Yes, yeah. So all our best practices are available to the affiliates. Yeah.
You had mentioned one gentleman, or it wasn't Don Dwyer, it was the other guy from Nashville. And you said he wasn't ready and then moved down, and when he was 15, how did you all figure out when he was ready? Was that a determination with the parents or the club or both?
Generally, so by rule of thumb, we generally don't try to bring in players if they're not about that high school age, for two reasons. One, it's very young to relocate with or away from your family. Even with your family, it's a very young age to relocate. So we feel from a developmental standpoint that if you look at general development, athletic development, there's many stages. So that 12 to 14 age is called the training to train phase of your development. That 10 to 12 is the learning to train, but / the romantic phase. That's where they fall in love with the game, but they also start learning how to train. And then 12, 13, 14, there's some overlap. You're training to train. So you start to show a little more commitment. 15 to 16 is the commitment phase. So that's general player and youth development. And that's really across all sports. That's general child development. Okay, so we try to, we don't discourage, but we don't encourage folks to, to your point, we have many kids coming for trials from all over the place, even at U12 and U13. If they're good enough, we offer them a spot, but we do not offer them a spot and part of a residency program. If the parents want to relocate, that's up to them. We just they came for trials, we offer them a spot, they're good enough. We're just saying they're good enough, and it's up to them to figure out if they want to make that work or not. Now, when they get to that age, Felipe's age, that high school age, if a player is good enough, then we're looking at active ways of bringing them in. So there's different ways we do that. So it's a little bit of child development, but it's, at the end of the day, it's also the parents' and players' decision, really the parents' decision at that point, what they want to do. But we have conversation with them. So we've got kids that have moved at 12 and 13, and our conversation went like this. Hey, your kid's good enough, we're offering him a spot, but if it was my kid, I wouldn't be moving. So your choice, though. We've actually said that to parents. We want to be honest with them because it is a big commitment, and remember, they're kids, and there's no guarantee that they continue on their path and become pros. And remember, their dreams at 12 and 13 are to play for Barcelona, and when that gets crushed, it's kind of devastating. So they're not at a point where they have enough self-awareness and real true commitment to their future that when they fail, they can actually navigate it. So between 10 and 13, 14, those are conversations that still need a lot of guidance. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to talk about sports specialization so early within the DA and what you guys do to combat that with a 10-month cycle?
So if you hear what Tim's question is asking about sports specialization and what we do to kind of manage that over the 10-month cycle. So I mentioned doing fun things for them. So playing kickball or any fun tag games, whatever they want to do. There are days where they come and they just say, hey, what do you guys want to do? Let's play kickball, let's play this, let's play whatever, and they do that. The other piece is we again, it's about the individual player. So we try and pay attention to each individual player. So what we do is we do what we call IDPs. It's called an individual development plan. And that starts at U13, and it starts with an interview. So early on in the season, we interview them. We sit down and we have a bunch of questions that we ask them with the parent, and it's just the questions. We're just asking questions to try and find out who they are, what they value, and what they want to do with the game. And it starts with that. And then they start working on setting their own short-term goals, long-term, and then short-term. And then they work on goal sheets, smart goal sheets. So they work on these sheets every week. So it's driven by the player. So we use that to kind of keep an eye on the player to see, hey, how is this player progressing and how is their social and mental state as well. We try and pay attention to that. So if a player we feel like maybe they have a dip in form and it's not normal, it's not usual, and we try and follow and see how they're doing, and that may mean that player may need to take a couple of weeks off. We're okay with doing that for the young ones. Give them a couple of weeks off, let them rejuvenate, or come to fewer practices during the week. So we have some flexibility with those young ages. We call the 12 to 14 the foundation phase. So we're putting in the foundation. It's not the pre-professional phase. So we have some flexibility. It's about nurturing them and getting them on the pathway, but helping them develop some self-awareness so they start to learn how to goal set and then manage their time and manage their goals and start to understand what the pathway looks like and what that commitment might look like in the next phase of development, which is going to be the pre-professional phase, that 15, 16. So it's a long season. So those two things we try and do to manage it. But two, when they have breaks, we encourage them to take breaks. When we have breaks, hey, forget soccer. Go and do something completely different. Play another sport. Do something completely, or do nothing. It's okay. It's okay to take a break completely away from soccer. So that's important for us during the breaks time, that they stay away from the game. What will happen, though, is players that have high aspirations won't. Okay? And that's what we also hope, that maybe they won't, but it's self-motivated. So we maintain that you cannot overtrain if you're training by yourself. You cannot. I don't think it's possible. I think it will take many years before you hit that point of overtraining. I'll give you an example. So back to an individual player pathway. I was fortunate to be involved with a young player from the time he was 7 years old. He's now a professional. He started at 17 years old. He was a player that used to come home every day and spend a minimum of 2 hours on his own. Minimum. Winter, summer, spring, fall, it didn't matter the year. Minimum of 2 hours with the ball. When he was 7, it was actually till when he was about 8, it clicked for him. From the time he was 8 till he ended up at an academy and then signing his pro contract at 17. But he drove the bus. There were times where I had to talk to him to tell him to do less, but it was because I could start to see him get frustrated at the team level. And so what he would do is he'd go and work that frustration out. And now he was overtraining because his mental state when he was training was not right. But when he was working on his own and enjoying the game and trying to improve himself, you cannot overtrain. A player cannot overtrain if they're training by themselves. Can they overtrain in front of a coach? Yes, because the environment is different. The mental expectation and capacity is completely different. They are pushing themselves harder, whether they like it or not. The demands are much greater. So even when they come to us and we're making them do a little bit less, we recognize too that it's demanding too. So for example, the 12s and 13s, they don't train 4 days every week. We'll do 3 one week and then 4 the next. But we have the flexibility. If we have 2 games on the weekend, we're not training 4 days usually. We'll train 3. And there's days where if we have an overloaded schedule, we're training twice. Because the long-term benefit of the player is what's important to keep in mind. So we always try and keep a track of that. And we have sports scientists on staff too that help us keep track of players' physical development and their physical state. And we try and watch for their mental state too to help with those kind of things. Does that help us answer that question, Tim?
Once players join the DA, is the turnover of players, is the vast majority of players in the program keep on it, or do you lose, let's say, a player from the affiliates came in and joined, are they more likely to stay? Or have you seen that those players probably maybe 1 year and then they don't make the cut the following year?
That's a great question. So if you didn't hear his question, he was asking what's the turnover retention. So if a player comes in, what is the percentage or the retention of players that end up going all the way through? It's not very high. So we have 4 players right now in our U18s or in the USL team that started at U12 in the club. Only 4. Many of those players along the way, like I said, as you go along the pathway, reality sets in. For many of those players, it was they themselves pulled themselves out of the equation. It wasn't us cutting them. It was them coming to coach and going, Coach, I don't think I'm gonna make the next jump. So I want to focus on the college pathway. What do we need to do? And then some of them will stay with us. Some of them will go to Blue Valley or Lee Summit, depending on what those teams have as far as showcase events and that kind of thing goes. And so the answer is the retention rate it varies. It just depends. Each age group is different. So our 16s right now was a very talented group. They won, when they were 14s, they won the national league as in the U15 age group. And that group is a talented group, and we've got actually a large percentage of those kids all came out of Kansas. That's a high percentage, that group. We're going to retain a lot of those kids. It's just because their initial talent level was pretty high, and they've worked hard and they've been with us a long time. So they fit the model, the method of what we understand what we do. So that group will be higher, but generally the numbers change with each year. It just depends. Our U12 group we feel is strong. Our U13 group is okay. I think our 12 group is a little stronger. Our 14 group is pretty talented. So it just depends. Each year is going to be different, because the other reality is we are always recruiting players. We're a professional club. Every professional club in the world, they all have academies, but guess how many scouts they have around the world? Hundreds. Scouting players in Africa, Europe, South America. They're always looking for the next player that can help elevate their program. That's the business, right? And we're no different. We have scouts all across the U.S. always looking for that player that can make a difference. But we're trying to bring them in at that next level. But our goal, and this is Peter Vermees's words, okay, is we want the core of our first team in the next few years. We don't know how long it's going to take, but down the road we want the core of the first team to have come out of the academy, but even more so to have been come out of locally or out of our affiliates. We're committed to that. That's where we want the core of our kids. Kind of the Barcelona model, that the core of the team came out of La Masia, and most of those kids who were in the academy since they were 12 and 13 years old. And that's kind of the model we're trying to follow as far as our academies and our affiliate programming. Our affiliates is our extension, because we don't have the geographical range, right? We have the challenges different to Europe. In Germany, when Germany won the World Cup, the federation came into the presentation over here, and somebody asked him about their scouting and their development network. And the guy stood up and said, in Germany, we don't miss any players. Everybody looked at him like he was crazy, like, what do you mean you don't miss? Surely you missed some players. He said, no, we don't miss any players. What they've done is, in the last 10 years, it was a 10-year plan, which led to them winning the World Cup this last time round. It was a 10-year plan. And the plan was to develop regional training centers. But for them, a region is like 20 miles. That's a region. So they had all these regional centers set up in Germany. So no players, every club in Germany was attached to a regional center. In other words, they had centers of excellence set up. And clubs would send their best players there for training, supplemental training, twice a week. It's like the same thing we're trying to do with the Center of Excellence. And they said, we don't miss players because we're attached to every club. Those coaches are full-time at the regional center, full-time. So that's all they do. And they work hand in hand with the club. Plus, they have regional scouting centers for the older ages. So when players develop more slowly and mature later, they don't miss those players either, because they wait to look for those players when they're junior and senior year. Because players develop differently physically a lot of the time too. So you have to take that into account. So that's a challenge we have in the US, is the geography, and the affiliate program for us is kind of our solution to help broaden that player pool, but try and create the same environment where hopefully we don't miss players. Now we may miss them in the short term, right? So a player may come to a GA Cup tryout, for example, and not make the team. But does that mean he's not going to make the academy at U13 or U14? Not at all. So we always encourage the players, if you don't make the team, what are you going to do? Is it your dream? If it's your dream, then keep working towards it, and we want to see you back. And we see players coming back. And we've seen players that have come back and then make the team eventually, because players develop on different cycles, okay? If I had a graph, I would draw it for you. So development is not linear. So there's early developers, and their curve looks pretty much like this. It's steep in the beginning, and then it flattens out later. Then you have slower developers, and they start slow, and then they push up towards the latter years of their teenage years. But the average player is more step-like. So they'll develop, it looks like they plateau, and then they'll push up again. They'll look like they plateau, and then they'll push up again. They may plateau for a long time, maybe going through puberty, peak height velocity, legs, shoes are size 12 and can't control their feet and looks like nothing's happening. Then they come out of it, and then they bump up. That's the average curve for an athlete. So no two players are the same. So it's important that you understand where the player's at and give them time. So like I talked about, the foundation phase, those 12s through 14s, we're pretty much more lenient as far as the pathway, the development for those players. So we've had players that come in and we pick them, and when a year later we're not sure that they're going to make it, but we keep them involved a lot of the time, and to see if it's just a stage that they may come through at the end of the day. So we try to be a little more, lenient's not the word, just more circumspect, to try and understand each individual player. And now look, there's some that come in and a year later we're pushing them out, you know, because there's different reasons, right? There's also discipline reasons, there's personality and attitude, things that we have to deal with, and those kind of things. But generally, if a player is doing their part, and the effort is good, and the work ethic is good, and they're aspired to our core values, and they're putting the work in, we generally give them time. We try to give them some time, especially at the early ages. But as you get into the pre-professional phase at 15, 16, now the writing's on the wall. You've either got to make the grade, and of course, still development takes place, but the expectations increase, right? The expectations increase, and if you match the expectations and do your part, then you could still stay in the equation. Chase Bromstead is a player we have right now. He's a good example of that. He's an underdeveloped player. Was a tiny guy. Was in the academy since 12 years old. He's from Kansas City, Missouri, and he's one of those 9 that are on an academy contract with the USL team, and he's still underdeveloped. He's a U18, but he's maybe a $140, if that, maybe a $130. So he's still physically underdeveloped, but he's a fantastic football player. So we those kind of players we're looking for. We're looking for football players, and so we keep him in the equation. He's actually on an academy contract right now, but he's committed to college too. So if that doesn't work out, he's going to go the college route. But we maintain their status. So another piece that people may not understand is when a player comes through the academy, when they go on to college, we maintain their homegrown rights, as long as they have so many hours of training with us in the club. So, for example, in the summer, we had about 22 guys or so that are in college come back to Kansas and train every day with us to get their homegrown training hours in. So they keep their homegrown eligibility. So we could sign them as homegrowns at any point in their college life, their college career. So that's a piece that most people don't know about. So it's not just a direct path. You're either going to go from DA to pro. You can go DA into college and then come back into pro down the line. Christian Duke was example of that, captain of the Swope Park Rangers. He was a good example of that pathway. Joe Amico, we signed him this year. He came through the academy. Went to college, we signed him after college to the USL contract. So we keep tabs, and every player that comes through the academy, we keep tabs on them. So to go back to your question, a player may come in and they go through a 2-year, 3-year cycle, and maybe they step out. Maybe the writing's on the wall, we have a mutual conversation, they step out. Does that mean the door's closed? No, not at all. That's not at all. Provided it's done right, provided the process is followed right, the door is always open. They can come back. There may be reasons why at that point it makes sense that they're not there at that time. Things happen. Life is busy, family challenges, whatever it is, it can happen. The door is always open as long as when they leave it's done right and that we're all in agreement when they leave. So, does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you all for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. We appreciate, really, I want to acknowledge the board and the directors here at Sporting Omaha for the work that they're doing. The players that we've seen showing up from COE through GA Cup, through the older ages, it's impressive. So your directors are doing a great job developing players. So just to give them credit. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
On your way out, just a few things to think about. One, athletics before age 13, 14 and athletics after are two very different things. And those of you that have maybe had some older sons and daughters know what I'm talking about. So going back to that marathon and not a sprint, very important to remember. A lot changes over time. Secondly, the idea of what else can we do locally, what can we do as a club to foster some of this. One is adopting the ideals, right? Understanding that the rest of the world is very successful at soccer largely because they follow similar models, right? And we believe in this one. We also, as Declan mentioned with response to Joel's question, have access to nutrition. We have curriculum that we use for both boys and the girls, and we're gradually implementing that on a larger scale in the club. And also the idea that we have access to training observation is a very important one as well. And if anybody ever, as we mentioned, is interested in taking advantage of that, let us know. So boys, girls, young, old, we're trying to make sure we got everybody covered as best we can. So again, on behalf of Declan and the club, we thank you for coming out. Everybody have a great evening.